Hello, fourth graders. Just want to let you know that during your library time, we're going to read the 39 Clues. And this is The Maze of Bones, and this is by Rick Riordan, the same author of the Percy Jackson series and the Red Pyramid series with the Egyptian gods in it. So you already know with that author that this is going to be a great book. The back of it is really what caught my attention. It says, what would happen if you discovered that your family was one of the most powerful in human history? Then it goes on to say, what if you were told that the source of your family's power was hidden around the world in the form of 39 clues? Would you take $1 million, or would you start with your trek to find these 39 clues? Which one would you choose? All right, so if anybody can figure out the source of the family's power before we get to the end of it, please let me know what you think. All right, so we're going to read 2 chapters at a time. The first chapter is super short. The third chapter is a lot longer, but we should be able to read it quickly, okay? So again, 39 Clues, The Maze of the Bones, and we'll have an activity with this during your library time where we're talking through Google Meet. So I'm excited. Chapter 1. 5 minutes before she died, Grace Cahill changed her will. Bam, it starts out like, man, somebody died and there's a will. So who gets what? That's the question. Her lawyer brought out the alternate version, which had been her most guarded secret for 7 years. Whether or not she would actually be crazy enough to use it, William McIntyre had never been certain. Madam, he asked, are you sure? Grace gazed out the window across the sunlit meadows of her estate. Her cat, Saladin, snuggled beside her as he had throughout her illness. But his presence was not enough to comfort her today. She was about to set in motion events that might cause the end of civilization. Yes, William. Her every breath was painful, I'm sure. William broke the seal on the brown leather folder. He was a tall, craggy man. His nose was pointed like a sundial, so it always cast a shadow over one side of his face. He had been Grace's advisor, her closest confidant, for half her life. They shared many secrets over the years, but none as perilous as this. Oh my goodness. So it said that it could possibly end the world. What power does this woman have? These are questions you should be asking yourself. He held the document for her to review. A fit of coughing racked her body. Saladin meowed with concern. Once the coughing passed, William helped her take the pen. She scrawled her weak signature across the paper. They're so young, William lamented. If only their parents, but their parents didn't, Grace said bitterly. And now the children must be old enough. They are our only chance. If they don't succeed, then 500 years of work have been for nothing, Grace said. Everything collapses. The family, the world, all of it. Oh my goodness. So the fate of the world is in the hand of 2 kids. Uh-oh, this is getting a little scary. William nodded grimly. He took the folder from her hands. Grace sat back, stroking Saladin's silver fur. The scene outside the window made her sad. It was too gorgeous of a day to die. She wanted to have one last picnic with the children. She wanted to be young and strong and travel the world again. But her eyesight was failing. Her lungs labored. She clutched her jade necklace, a good luck talisman she found in China years ago. It had seen her through many close calls with death, many lucky misses, but the talisman couldn't help her anymore. She'd worked hard to prepare for this day. Still, There was so much she'd left undone, so much she had never told the children. It will have to be enough, she whispered. And with that, Grace Cahill closed her eyes for the last time. Never read a book, I don't think, that started out with the death of someone. And evidently she's somebody important. When he was sure Grace had passed away, William McIntyre went to the window and closed the curtains. William preferred darkness. It seemed more proper for the business at hand. The door opened behind him. Grace's cat hissed and disappeared under the bed. William didn't look back. He was staring at Grace Cahill's signature on her new will, which had just become the most important document in the Cahill family history. And remember, a will is what someone writes before they die, telling what they want to happen with everything they own. So like I have a daughter, in my will, I would leave everything to my daughter. And that's a dog and yeah, a dog. Well, a brisk voice said. William turned. A man stood in the doorway, his face obscured by shadows, his suit as black as oil. It's time, William said. Make sure they suspect nothing. William couldn't tell for sure, but he thought the man in black smiled. Don't worry, the man promised. They'll never have a clue. This is really what we call eerie. You know, we don't know what's going on, but we're hearing comments about like possible end of the world. People are kind of plotting and planning things. So we're now on chapter 2. Dan Cahill thought he had the most annoying big sister on the planet. And that was before she set fire to $2 million. Oh my. It all started when they went to their grandmother's funeral. Secretly, Dan was excited because he was hoping to make a rubbing of the tombstone after everyone was gone. He figured Grace wouldn't care. She'd been a cool grandmother. Dan loved collecting things. He collected baseball cards, autographs of famous outlaws, Civil War weapons, rare coins, and every cast he'd ever had since kindergarten. All 12 of them. He's broken a lot of bones. At the moment, what he liked collecting best were charcoal rubbings of tombstones. He had some awesome ones at the apartment. His favorite read, Prula Good, 1891 to 1929. I'm dead. Let's have a party. And what that is, that tombstone rubbing is just putting a piece of paper on a tombstone, because oftentimes a tombstone is what's on a grave, and it marks whose grave it is. It tells their name, their year born, and the year that they died, and maybe something else. But people will put a piece of paper on that and rub like charcoal or pencil on the paper so the words will come on the paper. So that's what this kid liked to collect. He figured if I had a rubbing of Grace's tombstone in his collection, maybe it wouldn't feel quite so much like she was gone forever. Anyway, the whole way from Boston to the funeral in Bristol County, his great aunt Beatrice was driving like a very slow lunatic. She went 25 miles an hour on the highway and kept drifting across lanes, so the other cars honked and swerved and ran into guardrails and stuff. Aunt Beatrice just kept clutching the wheel with her jeweled fingers. Her wrinkly face was made up with day-glow red lipstick and rouge, that's blush, which made her blue hair look even bluer. Dan wondered if she gave the other drivers nightmares about old clowns. Amy, she snapped as another SUV careened down the exit ramp because Beatrice had just pulled in front of it. Stop reading in the car. It's not safe. But Aunt Beatrice, young lady, close that book. Amy did, which was typical. She never put up a fight with adults. Amy had long reddish brown hair, unlike Dan's, which was dark blonde. This helped Dan pretend his sister was an alien imposter, but unfortunately they had the same eyes, green like jade, their grandmother used to say. Amy was 3 years older and 6 inches taller than Dan, and she never let him forget it, like being 14 was such a big deal. Usually, she wore jeans and some old t shirt because she didn't like people noticing her. But today, she was wearing a black dress, so she looked like a vampire's bride. Dan Dan hoped her outfit was as uncomfortable as his stupid suit and tie. Aunt Beatrice had thrown a fit when he tried to go to the funeral in his ninja clothes. It wasn't as if Grace would care if he was comfortable and deadly the way he felt when he pretended to be a ninja, but of course, Aunt Beatrice didn't understand. Sometimes it was hard for him to believe she and Grace were sisters. Remind me to fire your au pair as soon as we return to Boston, Beatrice grumbled. You two have been entirely too spoiled. Nellie's nice, Dan protested. This Nellie almost let you burn down the neighbor's apartment building. Exactly. Every couple of weeks, Beatrice fired their au pair, and an au pair is like a nanny. It's someone who babysits kind of long term for extended hours, and sometimes the au pair or nanny may even live with the family. The only good thing was that Aunt Beatrice didn't live with them personally. She lived across town in a building that didn't allow kids, so sometimes it took her a few days to hear about Dan's latest exploits. Nellie had lasted longer than most. Dan liked her because she made amazing waffles and she usually cranked her iPod up to brain damage level. She didn't even hear when Dan's bottle rocket collection went off and strapped across the building in the alley. Dan would miss Nellie when she got fired. Aunt Beatrice kept driving and muttering about spoiled children. Amy secretly went back to her huge book. The last 2 days since they got the news about Grace's death, Amy had been reading even more than usual. Dan knew it was her way of hiding, but he kind of resented it because it shut him out too. What are you reading this time, he asked. Medieval European doorknobs, bath towels through the ages? Amy gave him an ugly face, or an uglier than usual face. None of your business, dweeb. You can't call a ninja lord dweeb. You have disgraced the family. You must commit seppuku. Amy rolled her eyes. After a few more miles, the city melted into farmland. It started to look like Grace country, and even though Dan had promised himself he wouldn't get sappy, he began to feel sad. Grace had been the coolest ever. She treated him and Amy like real people, not kids. That's why she insisted they simply call her Grace, not grandmother or gran or nana or any silly name like that. She'd been one of the only people who'd ever cared about them. Now, she was dead, and they had to go to the funeral and see a bunch of relatives who had never been nice to them. You know, grandparents are very special people. I had two amazing grandmothers myself. The family cemetery sat at the bottom of the hill from the mansion. Dan thought it was kind of stupid they'd hired a hearse to carry Grace 100 yards down the driveway. They could have put wheels on the coffin, like they have on suitcases, and that would have worked just as well. Summer storm clouds rumbled overhead. The family mansion looked dark and gloomy on its hill, like a lord's castle. Dan loved the place, with its billion rooms and chimneys and stained glasses. He loved the family graveyard even more. A dozen crumbling tombstones spread out across a little creek. Grace used to take Amy and him down to the meadow on their weekend visits. Grace and Amy would spend the afternoon on a picnic blanket, reading and talking while Dan explored the graves and the woods and the creek. Stop that, Dan told himself. You're getting sentimental. So many people, Amy muttered as they walked down the driveway. You're not going to freak out, are you? Amy fiddled with the collar of her dress. I'm not freaking out. You hate crowds, he finished. But you knew there'd be a crowd. They come every year. I'm going to stop in the middle of that chapter because there's a lot more in that chapter to read. But think about what we read so far. We read about a grandmother who was on her deathbed. She had a second will that she signed and made official. She said that her kids or her grandkids needed to know this information to try to save the world, because if they didn't do what they needed to do, the world wouldn't be saved. And we don't know saved from what, saved from whom. There's a lot of unanswered questions just in that first chapter and the half of the second chapter. So I want you to think about making some inferences. What could these kids come up against? How would the world possibly end if they didn't accomplish what they needed to accomplish? Remember, making inferences, that's making an educated guess, using your background knowledge. Some people say schema, that's the same thing, what I already know. And we're adding that to the clues that we've read in the book. And then we're going to try to make an educated guess. Okay? Man, I don't know. But one of my inferences could possibly be knowing Rick Riordan and his work. Could this be about Greek gods? Or monsters in general? Could monsters try to take over? Could it be aliens? Okay, those are some of my inferences. What do you think? All right, we'll figure it out as we continue to read the 39 Clues, The Maze of Bones.